Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Jackson, and I have the honor of serving as the mayor of the Township of Montclair. And our township is truly honored this morning to be hosting an event that, in some respects, I guess we wish we never had to have, because we believe the issue and the concern is so obvious, but seems to also continually fall on ears that are not receptive, I should say. I'm going to also want to take the opportunity to thank Senator Menendez and his team and all the other elected officials who are here, who have taken time out of their busy schedule to come and to express their support for the legislation that the Senator and other members of the Senate and Congress have proposed to help us address this issue of gun violence. You know, it was more than 50 years ago now. Senator Kennedy referred to the mindless violence of America, the mindless menace of violence in America. And how sad, how ironic that, lo, these many years later, we're still talking about this same issue. And, you know, and I respect those who, in other parts of perhaps of our town, in other parts of our country, who have different opinions. And I think part of our greatness of this country is the ability to have a discourse about different opinions. However, I think in any kind of experiment, one might say, let's try something. So I think for the last 50-plus years, we've been trying a philosophy that says there is no gun control. There is no, and I think the results speak for themselves. So I think any rational person might say, well, let's try something else, and let's see how that works. And what I find most disturbing and most disconcerting is that those who are not willing to even say intellectually, regardless how one might feel philosophically, let's try something different, see if it works. And what we're simply saying here, and God bless the Senator and all those who are supporting this, let's try something else to see if we can end this mindless menace of violence in our country. So with that, thank you. Welcome to Montclair. And we're hoping that, Senator, we're going to be, anything we can do to support you, we're going to do it. God bless. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor, very much for hosting us today in a great progressive community of Montclair, and for your leadership here in town. We appreciate that as well. I appreciate not only the mayor and other elected officials here, Congresswoman Sherrill, who's been a tremendous advocate in the House, and she's arrived and has already voted for some of these critical legislation that we want to see passed in terms of reasonable gun safety measures. The county executive, who has always been on our side on these issues, Sheriff Fontoura, who was a law enforcement, one of the premier law enforcement officials in our state, has always been on the right side of reasonable gun safety measures and has been such a tremendous advocate. Assemblywoman Timberlake, Freeholder Gill, so, and to all of Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action, Everytown, New Jersey, who I think are the most powerful voices in this effort to get reasonable gun safety measures. I thank all of them for their continuous advocacy and for being the moral conscience of this issue. As we speak, children throughout New Jersey and the nation are headed back to school. It's an exciting time for our children. Students of all ages are asking themselves questions like, will I like my new teacher? Will my friends be in the same classes? Will I make the team this year? But for many students and parents, there's another question in the back of their minds. It's a question that no child should ever have to wonder. And that's the question, will my school be next? These days, the threat of gun violence weighs heavily on our families. And it's not just schools that we worry about. It's going to church or a mosque or synagogue. It's seeing a movie or attending a local parade. It's walking through our neighborhoods or shopping at a mall. People are on edge. Just look at what happened Monday at Newark Airport. Travelers quickly panicked and assumed a mass shooter was on the loose when the alarm went off. Too many people have said to me, I find myself looking for the exit signs, or I look around for where to take cover, or I just don't feel safe anymore. This is the United States of America. In this country, people should be able to feel safe in their communities. Yet the daily drumbeat of gun violence in this country makes clear that our gun laws are broken. Again and again, we have been heartbroken by mass shootings. From Tucson and Newtown to Las Vegas and Parkland, from Pittsburgh to Poway, to Dayton, El Paso, and now Midland and Odessa. We have been outraged by the gun lobby's death grip on so many of our leaders, including the President of the United States. We have been stunned by Republicans in Washington, led by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who has taken over $1 million from the NRA and continues to stand in the way of life-saving gun safety reforms. But here's the thing. The will of the American people is growing stronger. Across America, students, families, and grief-stricken communities are crying out for change. Already, Democrats in the House have taken action. They passed a universal background check, which could have, if it had passed the Senate, and I believe it would pass if it was simply given a vote by Leader McConnell, and then have the President make the decision, do I sign this or not? I'm tired of hearing we have to wait for the President to tell us what he's willing to sign. That's not the way the Constitution of the United States was made. There are checks and balances. Let's send a bill to the President and see if he signs it or not. And then we know who stands for what. In the coming weeks, that universal background check would have stopped the individual in Texas because he made the purchase in a private sale. Under the universal background check that Congresswoman Sherrill voted for and the House Democrats pushed, even a private sale would have had to go through a universal background check. In the coming week, I believe the House, it was going to do it today, but because of the storm, many members from Florida could not make it. The House Judiciary Committee is expected to bring up the companion bill to my own legislation, the Keep Americans Safe Act. This legislation is as common sense as it gets. The Keep America Safe Act would limit the sale of ammunition to no more than 10 rounds, because a magazine that holds 30, 60, or 90 rounds of ammunition is not for hunting, it is not for self-defense or protecting your home. High-capacity magazines are designed for one thing and one thing only, high-capacity killing. This was part of the assault weapons ban I voted for back in 1994 as a member of the House. And since its expiration in 2004, large-capacity ammunition has become a gruesome hallmark of mass shootings, including in El Paso, Dayton, and likely Midland. To be clear, limiting magazine size isn't just about the mass shootings that make the news. These high-capacity clips are often used in the daily gun violence that terrorizes neighborhoods across America every day. This isn't about the Second Amendment right to own a firearm. This is about how much military-style firepower is available to civilian consumers. This is about one of the most practical ways to save lives. Consider that the 2010 mass shooting in Tucson, Arizona, only came to an end when the gunman paused to reload and a bystander was able to tackle him. And in 2012, several children at Sandy Hook Elementary were able to escape to safety when the gunman ran out of bullets and had to reload his AR-15. In a mass shooting, every second counts, even when law enforcement responds incredibly fast. In Dayton, the police subdued the assailant in less than a minute. But in just 30 seconds, nine people were dead and forever changed countless others who were injured. How many more acts of mass murder will it take for Leader McConnell to put American lives ahead of gun-making profits? I say that if saving lives requires limiting how much ammo is sold every day, then that is a price we are more than willing to pay. Ultimately, the Keep Americans Safe Act is one of the severely, urgently needed reforms. I believe we must reinstate the full assault weapons ban. We must require universal background checks, as the House has already passed, on every gun sale, whether it's at a store, a gun show, between neighbors, or online with the click of a button. And we must help communities and law enforcement work together to ensure that people who pose a threat to themselves or others do not have access to deadly weapons. Shortly after El Paso and Dayton, many of us had hoped the President meant what he said about universal background checks. But in recent days, Trump's statement suggests he's already caved into the NRA, just as he did after Parkland. When will the President and his allies cave to the will of the American people, who overwhelmingly support stronger gun safety laws? A Quinnipiac poll that came out just a few days ago, 92% universal background checks, 90-some-odd% as it relates to red flag laws, even 60% to an assault weapons ban. Come on. Make no mistake, in the coming days, the House Judiciary Committee will pass the Keep Americans Safe Act, and I'm confident the full House will follow suit with this and other critical reforms. But according to Leader McConnell, there will be no vote in the Senate on universal background checks or any other measures until the President declares his support. Well, these days, getting this President to take a clear position on these issues is anything is like pinning Jell-O to the wall. So how about Leader McConnell hold the vote so we can send some reasonable gun safety measures to the President's desk? He could hold the vote today. He could hold the vote on Monday when the Senate returns to work. He could put this country on a safer path. He could stand up to the NRA today. So, look, we know that no single law can stop every tragedy. We know that, in fact, it still takes a human being to pull the trigger. But you can't pull the trigger if you don't have access to a gun. You can't pull the trigger 90 or 100 times if you don't have a high-capacity magazine. This is how we save lives. But we know that some of these laws can stop some tragedies. So we can't give up. We must keep up the fight. We must demand action, because each day that goes by without action is another day until the next mass shooting takes place. Enough is enough. With that, let me call first Jamie Bedrin, Mothers Demand Action, the Essex County co-lead, a resident of Montclair, then Congresswoman Sherrill, then County Executive DiVincenzo, and then Sheriff Hunter.
Senator Menendez, how do you feel about public figures using armed security and paying private security to protect their offices and using them to escort by armed security 100% protected disabled veterans from senators' offices when all he's trying to do is ask for help from a clerical error?
I don't know because I don't know because I don't do that. So
at gunpoint out of your office.
yeah.
After I served 2 pumps from RJAP.
I don't know because we don't have protective services. At least I do not have as an individual senator. So we're happy. If you have an issue, we're happy to help you.
And now I'm asking a fellow public servant to serve me.
We're happy to help you. We'll give you the right contact in our office who deals with veterans issues.
The same bureaucracy that I've gone through with the VA. I just received an email from a young aide of the senators named Jeremy, who's fantastic. And Kasim, this gentleman here, is fantastic. They are curdled down. Excuse me, sir, I'm not breaking any laws. Excuse me, sir. I'm not disrupting, actually. Hold on a second. I'm on a cane and you put your arm and it's assault. Are you arresting me, sir? Then you cannot touch me with the law. I do not want to walk. Am I under arrest? Am I being detained? I'm in a public area. If it's going to go there, it's going to go there. But I'm not doing anything wrong.
All right. Why don't you let us finish? Why don't you let us finish the?
Received me. I got emailed from Jeremy, who's the senator's aide, who is an economist. Excuse me. Am I being detained? You have to tell me. Excuse me. This is assault. Okay. You're pulling a man on the cane, asshole. You have a dragged hip. Stop. Stop. Okay. Stop. 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 Can you stop pulling so I can use my cane properly? Okay. Excuse me, gentlemen. Excuse me, gentlemen. First off, I have items in there. Okay. Okay. Excuse me. What law? Put your hands off. Excuse me. You're pulling my hand, my cane, moron. You're not touching me. You're not allowed to. Am I under arrest?
All right. I'm I'm glad to hear that he mentioned several of our staff members who are helping him, and we are more than willing to continue to help the gentleman. I don't know what his specific issue is. But just to make it clear, I don't have any private security or for security of any sort. I travel freely everywhere. I go by myself. And if I'm accompanied by a staff, I assure you they're not armed. With that,
I'm back. Just bear with me for 1 second, which is to say, you want to know something really nice about being in this room today is I have one of my former teachers up on the stage with us. And in the audience is one of my former students working for Congresswoman Maggie Sherrill. It's a little bit of the circle of life in education, and I took notice of that. Thank you, Senator Menendez, for joining us in Montclair today. Thank you, Mayor Jackson, Congresswoman Sherrill, our elected officials who are here. Thank you for listening to your constituents and for trying to pass federal gun laws. We know that gun violence affects Americans everywhere. No one is immune to the carnage. I live around the corner from a post office where in 1995, 4 people were killed and 1 person was critically wounded due to gun violence. Last year, a local mother in Montclair was shot to death in her home by her boyfriend. We had a shooting at one of our local Ys about 10 years ago. But when we review the events of the past week, the Dayton, Ohio shooter used a rifle with a high-capacity drum magazine, capable of holding 100 rounds of ammunition. And as Senator Menendez demonstrated, while police were able to stop the shooter, and very quickly, the shooter was still able to fire dozens of shots and kill 9 people, largely because of the magazine capacity. 30 seconds to kill 9 people and shatter so many lives. Currently, 9 states regulate high-capacity magazines, and we know that states with these laws experience significantly fewer mass shootings than states without restrictions. In my faith, we subscribe to a concept called pikuach hanefesh. The idea in Judaism is that if you save 1 life, just 1 life, it's as if you've saved the entire world. And that the preservation of human life takes precedence over all the other commandments in Judaism. So, Senator Menendez, you are correct. When it comes to limiting magazine capacity, inaction is not an option. Our lawmakers must act now. Thank you.
I always love being back in my hometown, and I'm so glad to see everybody come out today to talk about this important issue. Thank you so much, Senator Menendez, for your leadership in the Senate on gun safety and your work to make sure the rest of the nation joins New Jersey in the fight to end this gun violence epidemic. Thank you, Mayor Jackson, right there, County Executive DiVincenzo. Thank you so much to Sheriff Ventura, to Freeholder President Gill, and to my representatives, Assemblyman Giblin and Assemblywoman Timberlake. I appreciate you all being here today. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for all of your work on this critical issue. I wish your work wasn't necessary, but I'm so glad all of you are fighting so hard for all of us. Thank you to the Moms Demand advocates. I see you everywhere, and I love it. I love those red shirts. I love the passion. I love the orange shirts of your kids. It's just wonderful to see everybody, and such important work that you do. It's been almost 200 days since the House passed universal background check legislation on February 27th of this year. And since then, there have been 243 mass shootings in this country. The House has also passed enhanced background checks legislation to close the Charleston loophole. On April 4th, we passed the Violence Against Women Act, closing the boyfriend loophole, because we know that women are often shot by people they know. Last month, a shooter in Dayton, Ohio, killed 9 and injured 27 more in 30 seconds. That was made possible by the 100-round drum magazine on his high-capacity rifle. Despite the everyday gun violence we experience in our cities and towns across America, despite the mass shootings, despite losing more people to gun violence than in the wars we are currently fighting, despite levels of violence that no other modernized country lives with, despite widespread support in this country for gun safety legislation, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell refuses to take action to keep our communities and our children safe. So I'm sending my kids back to school tomorrow because, like parents across Montclair and millions more around the country, they need to go to school, they need to see their friends, they need an education. But they should be focusing on math and social studies. They should be focusing on recess, not on learning to hide from active shooters. And I'm tired of hearing stories like I did last week, when a resident in our community told me about how her daughter was afraid to change schools because she didn't know where to hide from shooters in her new school. The House has acted, and we're going to continue to take up gun safety legislation. And I'm proud to co-sponsor the assault weapons ban and the House companion to Senator Menendez's Keep Americans Safe Act that limits large capacity magazines. And as a veteran, I am well versed in weapons of war. I know that they don't have places on our streets, in our schools, in our churches. So it's time for the Senate to join us, to join the rest of America and show we have the courage to lead, because anything less in this country is simply unacceptable. So thank you all so much for being here today, and thank you, Senator Menendez.
Essex County, the state of New Jersey is very, very lucky to have a great senator, Senator Bob Menendez, and the work that he's done, because he's taken this issue on day one, and also Congressman Sherrill. They do an outstanding job to moms demand action. You could spot them anywhere. If you don't spot them, you can hear them from everywhere. They want to make you listen, and it's absolutely right. So thank you for you doing it. To all the elected officials here, we're all on the same page here. You know, Senator Menendez mentioned earlier about taking your daughter or your son. Well, every morning I take my granddaughter to school, and I've done that, and she's in the 3rd grade. She goes to Wilson Avenue School in Cornwall. And I know that's on the minds, and not of myself, it's on the minds of the parents. But when I'm there and I see the parents, and they come up to me and they talk to me because they have concern, you know, is our kids really going to be safe? And you don't know what to tell them, you know. You said, listen, if the right thing is done, you know, they will be safe, but you always got to be aware. And he said something about when you're away, you look at the exit. Yeah, I know I do, look at the exit. We live in a different world. And what Senator Menendez is asking for is reasonable legislation. I mean, to have universal background checks and have 92% support, it's a no-brainer. But it all comes down to politics. And you have a president that says one thing 1 minute, says something else the next minute, and he's not a very good leader. And Senator Mitch McConnell, he should be ashamed of himself. He should be ashamed of himself. Listen, all he has to do is, everybody has their own individual vote, how they're going to vote. All he has to do is put it up or down. This legislation's already been in place. He's got to put it up and let the people, let them vote. And then you see what's done. But something needs to be done. And I'm just happy that we're coming together, we're dealing with it, and we have to show our support to Senator Menendez and Congresswoman Sherrill, because they're fighting for us each and every day. Thank you.
We are blessed indeed to have such lions doing our work for us. Senator Menendez has been in the forefront of gun control legislation when he was in the legislature, New Jersey legislature. I had the honor to work with him then, and in Congress, and now in the United States Senate. Mikey Sherrill is a blessing for all of us in the state of New Jersey and in our nation. Our state legislatures, Tom Giblin, Brittany Timberlake, continue to make sure that we in New Jersey have the strongest gun laws anywhere in the country. And yet, our officers, whose sole job is to keep our families, our children in particular, safe. That's basically what we do. That's what you expect us to do. Last year, in Essex County, between the Newark Police, our partners, the Newark Police, our officers, Municipal Montclair, all the other partners, we seized close to 700 guns in Essex County, in a state where we have the strongest laws in the nation. This year, we're on pace to keep up with last year. Hopefully, it will be a little bit less. But when you may have read a couple of weeks ago, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, and a 16-year-old armed with semi-automatic handguns get involved in a shootout on school grounds, I think it's time that the rest of this nation takes heed. Our officers, when going out nowadays, on a simple execution of an arrest warrant or a narcotics search warrant, Chief Conforto will tell you that we now must first saddle up what we call a tactical response team. That's a special unit, specially trained with an armored vehicle to go in and make sure that our officers and the community in that neighborhood is safe. Didn't have to do that years ago. It was a simple knock on a door and, let's go. You're under arrest and let's move. If our officers now come back without a firearm, our first question always is, Chief, where's the gun? There was no gun there? Because it's very rare indeed that we don't come back with at least one semi-automatic weapon, perhaps two, of all types. A magazine with 10 rounds should be plenty for anyone, more than enough. 15 for law enforcement, 10 for everyone else, I think that that's enough. You don't need a 30-round clip for an AK-47 that you find in and around our schools. Our schools today are mostly equipped with technology to protect all of our children, but in addition to that, basically every school has at least one or more resource officer. What's a resource officer? Did they have it when you were going to school? No. Resource officers, they make sure that the children are safe without having to look over their shoulder. We will continue to do that as long as we have these folks, Senator Menendez, Mikey Sherrill, our legislature, our freeholder board behind this, our county executive who's the biggest supporter of any of this events, always has been, our mayor. We shall prevail. But I tell you folks, it's getting late. It's getting very late. There has been no significant improvement in our safety in our communities. In fact, it's the other way around. The frustration is starting to build in all of us. So let's get this done as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our speakers. Let me thank Senator Giblin for joining us again. He came in a little after I was speaking, so I didn't see him. A little difficult not to see him, but in any event, tall, distinguished gentleman. And I also appreciate the Newark Gun Street team who is here with us as well. I appreciate them being with us. With that, we're happy to answer a few questions. Yes.
Senator, I know you touched upon this a little bit earlier. Can you just spell out your theory on why you think McConnell won't bring up the vote?
Well, Senator McConnell has taken over $1 million from the NRA. The only thing I've gotten from the NRA is a lifetime F, which I'm proud of. The reality is that he seems incapable of, notwithstanding having received those contributions, he seems incapable of listening to the American people. He is either protecting the president and or complicit with the president in not pursuing votes on the Senate floor and let the votes go their way. I believe that when there is a vote, there will be enough votes for a universal background check. I believe that high-capacity magazines would also pass. Maybe some others would not, because that falls into the ambit of those who believe that there's an unlimited right under the Second Amendment. But I believe those provisions would pass. That would save a lot of lives. It would save a lot of lives and move us forward. You know, either the president is telling him, don't put anything up unless I say so, in which case then he says, I won't put anything up, the president, unless the president says he supports it. So they're playing a game. But it's a game that is deadly at the end of the day for people in our country. You know, it is time to let the Senate work its will. You know, as I mentioned earlier, the Constitution did not envision that the Congress would only pass laws that it thought a president would sign. That's what vetoes and overrides are all about. The Congress acts on behalf Congress acts as a separate co-equal branch of government on behalf of the American people that it collectively represents, and then the president can choose to sign or not to sign, and then substantiate why he takes that position. That should be the course of events that we are following. Yes?
Senator, a practical question. Events like this, how do you see them actually urging Mitch McConnell to do anything? Obviously, Mitch McConnell is not going to, if I say Mitch McConnell is not going to pay any attention to something like this, tell me why I'm wrong.
You know, it is very clear that the reason we're even having a closer conversation in which the president to some degree and Mitch McConnell to some degree is talking about whether or not they pursue any legislation on gun safety, that is because rising pressure. I think Adlai Stevenson said it best. When I get the heat at home, I see the light in Washington. And so we need to generate a lot of heat. So not only in New Jersey, but across the country. And our colleagues, my colleagues in the Senate, are doing, on the Democratic side at least, are doing this throughout the nation, including in states that aren't as strong on gun safety laws as New Jersey is, which I give credit to previous administrations, certainly to Governor Murphy and to our legislature that has been very active in enhancing. And that's why we have one of the lowest rates of homicide by gun in the nation. Is a result of our laws. We still have more work to do. Our problem is that guns come from outside of New Jersey into New Jersey because they don't have the same laws that we have. And so that's why federal legislation is important. These opportunities keep this center stage, because it's very easy to forget until the next tragedy. But we're committed to never forgetting and never stopping until we get this done. Congresswoman Cheryl's going to do that. Ay, caramba. There we go. Sí. All right, so please excuse me for a minute. Lo que estamos aquí hoy diciendo es que tenemos que tener leyes razonables en control de armas. Sobre todo, la capacidad de tener un arma que puede tirar 50 o 100 balas. No hay necesidad para tener 50 o 100 balas. Eso es para el ejército, no para el cuerpo civil. La única razón por tener 50 o 100 balas es para matar personas y matarla con una capacidad enorme. Eso es lo que hemos visto en tragedia después de tragedia, de los números de personas que han muerto porque la capacidad del arma que se está usando y los números de balas que pueden usar ha sido de una capacidad enorme, que dice una capacidad de matar muchas personas. Y también tener un chequeo universal de todas las compras de armas, sea en una tienda, sea por la computadora, sea en una venta privada o un show de armas. Todo eso queremos un chequeo universal. Por ejemplo, lo que pasó en Texas no hubiera pasado si la ley que la congresista Cheryl termina de votar en la Cámara de Representantes, pero no está en el Senado, porque el senador republicano, el líder del Senado, el senador McConnell, ha recibido más de $1 millón del NRA, que es la entidad que promueve contra todas las leyes razonables de armas, y no nos ha dado un voto en el Senado. Por eso estamos tratando de crear conciencia y presión para tener ese voto. Anyone else? Okay, with that, thank you all very much. Okay.